After enduring 2 centuries of British rule, August 15, 1947 brought the first taste of freedom. The crowds gathering at the Red Fort were witnessing the end of an empire. But miles away from those official celebrations, the roads and railways told a very different story. Over 15 million people found themselves suddenly uprooted. Families were forced to abandon ancestral lands, triggering the largest human displacement in history. Exactly 90 years earlier, during the 1857 rebellion, Hindus and Muslims had stood together, risking their lives against the East India Company over the grease on an Enfield rifle cartridge. Within a single century, a population that had once spilled blood against a common colonizer was being violently torn apart by the very lines meant to define their future. Following the 1857 mutiny, British strategists determined that their control over the subcontinent depended on breaking the unity between Hindus and Muslims. This strategy materialized in 1905 with the Partition of Bengal. While officially administrative, the new borders deliberately separated a massive population strictly along religious lines. The resulting public outrage and nationwide protests eventually forced a partial walkback, but the colonial government quickly introduced the Morley-Minto reforms in 1909 to cement the divide. These separate electorates partitioned the voting population into walled-off religious silos, mandating Muslim citizens vote only for Muslim candidates. By isolating voters, the law removed incentives for cross-community coalitions. Electoral survival now required appealing exclusively to a narrow religious base. Through a few strokes of a legislative pen, the colonial authorities successfully turned a unified national resistance into an internal competition for political dominance. Muhammad Ali Jinnah actually began his career fighting against these divisions. A London-educated barrister, he was famously hailed as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. However, throughout the 1920s, Jinnah felt increasingly marginalized by the strategies of the Indian National Congress. He eventually stepped away from secular nationalism, shifting his focus firmly to Islamic political identity. This mirrored a growing intellectual movement. In 1930, Allama Iqbal formally proposed a consolidated Muslim state, and by 1933, a student pamphlet officially coined the name Pakistan. Mahatma Gandhi made desperate attempts to halt the fracture. In September 1944, he traveled to Jinnah's residence 14 times to negotiate an alternative to partition. The political impasse spilled into the streets. Following the call for Direct Action Day in 1946, severe communal riots erupted across Calcutta, leaving thousands dead. The theoretical debate was over. The streets were fractured by brutal violence, and the prospect of holding the subcontinent together under one government had collapsed. Exhausted by World War II and civil unrest, the British government decided on a rapid exit. Lord Mountbatten arrived as the final viceroy with a strict deadline to transfer power. To physically divide the territory, they brought in British judge Cyril Radcliffe. Having never visited India and knowing nothing of its geography, he was given just 5 weeks to draw the borders of 2 nations. The Radcliffe Line arbitrarily sliced through Punjab and Bengal, splitting ancient communities, severing farmlands, and cutting directly through homes. Bizarrely, these finalized borders weren't announced until August 17th. Millions celebrated independence 2 days earlier, not knowing which country they were standing in. The colonial government's insistence on a rapid bureaucratic exit ignored the massive humanitarian catastrophe their new map was already triggering. The sudden imposition of those borders triggered an immediate scramble for survival. Massive convoys of people trekked in both directions across the new lines, facing extreme violence and exhaustion along the way. The chaos extended well beyond the partitioned provinces. The British departure legally released over 500 princely states from their treaties, threatening a total disintegration of the subcontinent. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel launched a massive diplomatic campaign to integrate these fragments. Through negotiations, military pressure, and political maneuvering, he targeted crucial holdouts like Junagadh and Hyderabad. Patel's efforts systematically dissolved the borders of hundreds of individual monarchies, merging them into the contiguous shape of the modern Indian Republic. The final map of India was secured through immense political will. Yet the events of 1947 stand as a reminder. When institutions manipulate religious identity to maintain power, the heaviest toll is ultimately paid by the people on the ground.